page 126, this is the birth of Yaakov and Esav. And you'll notice that the birth of Yaakov and Esav, on page 126, the fourth line on the page. It says, Vayigdalu hane'orim, the two lads grew up. Vahi Esav ish yodei tzayid ish sada. Esav was a hunter, a man of the fields. Yaakov ish tam yoshev aholim. Yaakov was a, how does he translate tam? A wholesome man. Ooh, good word. Who sat in the tents. Now, if you look at Rashi here, Rashi says, what are these tents referred to? Left column of Rashi, fourth line to the top. What does it mean he sat in the tents? What tents are we talking about? Says Rashi, Yoshev aholim, aholo shel shem v'aholo shel aver. The tents of Shem and Aver, which the Gemara told us they had yeshivas back in those days, even before the Torah was given. Yaakov sat in yeshiva. Yaakov sat in he was on the JLE program of the time, with a 14-year program. Yaakov was in the tents of Shem and Aver. So from the earliest age, Esav was a hunter. And Yaakov was a wholesome man who sat by the book and he studied Torah, whatever Torah existed, whatever they studied, whatever godliness they studied before the Torah as we know it was given. Okay, so first of all, just an interesting insight here, what it means, the difference between Yaakov and Esav. Esav is a man of the fields. Fields, by definition, have no boundary. Fields have no borders. The Esavs in the world live without limitation. They live out in the fields. Everything. The world's a ballpark. It's a field, and that's why the Esavs look the way they do, because you have absolutely no limits and no boundaries, like a man of the field. Take a child, by the way. Take a child. Put a child down in any big area. Take a 3-year-old boy or 4-year-old boy. Anybody, go to an airport, and just put him down in the airport. You very rarely find areas that have long extending walkways like you do in airports. Put a child down in any grassy area. Take him out to the park. Put him down in the grass. What does a 3-year-old start doing? First thing he does, he starts running. I don't even know where he's running to. He starts right. Just let's run. It's open. Let's run. He starts running. That's an Esav. An Esav is a person who's got no limits. He's just running through life. He's got absolutely no limits. Yaakov is by definition in a tent. And a tent, by definition, means you got borders. We're living with self-control. That's the basic idea, difference between Yaakov and Esav. But even more than that, the Torah tells us over here, what are tents? Tents are the tents of Torah. Okay, now go back to Parshat Kisisa, where we were yesterday. So yesterday, we said that when you go out to war, you're going to win the war. Tetzei lemilchama aloivecha. When you go to war against your enemy, then Hashem will deliver him into your hand. You'll take a captive. So yesterday we pointed out that the last 5 letters of the first 5 words spell out Elokecha. Your God is going to be what helps you to win in war. But the last 5 letters also spell out the words Oholecha, your tents. That means, what is it that causes the Jews to win in the wars? It's because of the tents of Torah. It's because we are in the tents of Torah, and it is the merit of the Jewish people studying Torah that brings the merit of God helping us, and that's why the Jewish people win the war. That's our fundamental belief. Okay? Now, we started yesterday talking about one other point I want to mention here is the very first Rashi. It says, Kiseitze lemilchama alevecha. Look at the very first Rashi in the right column, top line. When you go out to war, says Rashi, b'milchemes harishus hakosav medaber. The Torah is talking about a war of an optional war. What does that mean, an optional war? Because the Jewish people fought 3 different types of wars. There's one war which is the enemies have attacked you. You have to defend yourself. That's called the Melchemes Mitzvah. In the Melchemes Mitzvah, there are no restrictions on who goes to war. The Gemara says, "Afilu chosan mechedro v'kala mechupasa." You take a chosan and kala from their wedding canopy, and they have to go into the war effort. The chosan may go to war, and the kala is on the supply line. That's a Melchemes Mitzvah. Everybody has the mitzvah to wage that war. There's something called Melchemes Rishus. Melchemes Rishus means an optional war, which is a war, let's say, to extend the borders of the land of Israel. David HaMelech decides, okay, let's take the occupied East Bank today, right? We want to extend the borders. Let's go up into Syria because we need more RAM. It's a war of expansion. You don't have to fight that war. You have the right to fight that war. The rules that the Torah is talking about here are talking about that kind of war. war, the Milchemes HaRishus. Okay, that's what Rashi tells us. The commentaries point out, ultimately, gentlemen, which is the biggest war you ever fight in your life? The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. The constant battle of the evil inclination. And when you fight against the evil inclination, the Torah tells you how you fight, how you win that war. The first step is, Tetzei lemilchama alevecha. You have to take the first step to wage war. You have to fight the evil inclination, and then you'll earn the divine assistance in Asana Hashem Lokecha Biyadecha. Hashem will send him in your hands. Hashem will help you out. But you can't just sit back. Listen, Hashem, I have a Yetzer Hara, help me out. No, you got to muster up a little willpower and fight. And what's the strategy? Vishafisa shivyo. Take him captive a little bit at a time. You're not going to become the Chafetz Chaim overnight, right? It may take you a while. It may take you a couple of weeks. A little bit at a time. Take a captive here, take a captive there, win a battle here, win a battle over there, and slowly but surely the spiritual level increases. That's Milchemes HaRishus. Now, there's a very important Torah principle that underlies all of this, and that's as follows. In our battle, we've spoken about this many times. In our battles, you can't fight the battle right at the battle front, right? It's too dangerous. You get killed. You have to fight the battle Milchemes HaRishus. That means, where does our work start? Our work starts not when I'm confronting a cheeseburger. Because if I lose that war, then I'm eating treif. My battle starts on Shabbos afternoon when I'm eating cholent. And it's permissible. Theoretically, I could eat as much cholent as I want. Theoretically, I do, right? So I could eat as much cholent as I want. But what my battle is after I've had my 2 or 3 or 6 helpings, then I have to exercise some self-control. And you know what? I would like some more, and I'm going to stop. If I lose the battle, okay, I didn't do anything. I didn't break the letter of the law. But I have to learn to control myself in the permissible areas. And if I can control myself in the permissible areas, then the forbidden areas aren't even a challenge. That's one of the beauties of Judaism. Imagine, I used to hear all the time, read on the news, they're interviewing a guy says, I'm a good person, I never hurt anybody. In the world at large, a good person means you never hurt anybody. You mind your business, we never hurt anybody, you're a good person. In Torah law, you're a good person. Stop and think about it. By us, it's forbidden to cause physical harm to somebody, right? Not only cause physical harm, but not to hit people, not to damage people. Not only not to cause physical harm, not even to talk bad about people. I mean, what would the soap operas do if they were concerned about Lashon Hara? All the soap opera people, all they're doing all day is talking Lashon Hara about other people, whichever nurse isn't there, the doctor and the other nurse are talking about her. Claire, there's always somebody named Claire. I don't know why, but the doctor and the nurse are busy talking, patients dying on the table, and they're talking about Claire. So the what do you call it now? We don't physically hurt people, we don't even talk about people. We don't talk bad about people, prohibited. Not only we don't talk bad about people, it's prohibited to even think bad about people, to judge people favorably. Imagine telling that to your average guy in the street. You have to control your thoughts. Get out of here. What do you, control your thoughts? Are you out of your mind? No, we're the ones that talk about controlling the mind. You're the one who's out of your mind. We're telling you have to control your mind. No, wait, it's incomprehensible. As long as you don't hit anybody, and you don't intentionally close the door on anybody's finger, you're a good person. In Torah, we don't even think bad about it. Could you imagine a guy who's working, a guy who's controlling himself to not think bad about people? And at a minimum, we're controlling ourselves to not speak bad about people. I'm certainly not going to hit anybody. Not going to hit. A Jewish fight is when you talk about what you would have done if you would have said another word. That's a Jewish fight. If he would have said one more word to me. Now, that's what we used to do in yeshiva. Talk about what we would have done if the guy would have said another word. Nobody ever hit anybody. It's unconscionable. You don't hit. You try not even to speak. You understand? The further you push, the higher the standard that you hold yourself to. If you're working, Jerry West, I don't know if I'm dating myself. You've heard of Jerry West? I'm assuming everybody's heard of Jerry West. He was a basketball player. He was arguably the best shooter ever, maybe Larry Bird, one up there. So Jerry West, he said what he used to practice, how they asked him how he become such a good shooter. He had a rim, and his rim, the parameter of a basketball rim, by the way, this is a perfectly useless piece of trivia, you could fit exactly 2 basketballs through a hoop. Did you know that? Nobody knew that, did you? And you could fit exactly 2 basketballs through a hoop. Then you wonder, how did he miss so much? Yeah, you could fit 2 basketballs through a hoop. He had a hoop that was a smaller hoop. So when he was shooting at his hoop in his backyard, he had to learn to become. So when he goes out on the court and he's shooting at a bigger hoop, it looks like a bucket, right? So if you could get it into a smaller hoop, you're certainly going to have a bigger problem with a bigger hoop. If I'm able to control myself, not think bad about people, and even if I'm not that good, at least I'll talk about people. I'm certainly not going to hit anybody. So if I could control myself around my cholent and my chocolate cake, I could certainly control myself around cheeseburgers. You understand? That's what the Torah is demanding of us. Right. It's like a kal v'chomer. And if it controls, so the Torah said, when you go to war against your enemy in the permissible areas, that's where the war begins. The war begins to control myself where it's permissible, then I certainly won't have trouble where it's prohibited. You know, there's a yeshiva guy in an airplane, and they served him a salami sandwich. The guy was starving. They put a salami sandwich down in front of him. So he gets up to wash, and he goes back to his seat. He had a kosher salami sandwich that they served him. He ordered a kosher meal. They served him with kosher salami. Everybody else had non-kosher salami sandwiches. So he comes back to his seat, and as he sits down, he thinks to himself, oy vey. There's a halacha, a rabbinic decree, that basar shenela min ha'ayin, if you have kosher meat, and nobody is supervising it, you're not allowed to eat it. There's a concern that by the time he got back, that somebody switched treif meat with it. So he sits down and he's starving. He says, well, it's a rabbinic law. Maybe I could. After all, I'm in an airplane. I'm going to starve to death. And he says, you know what? I can't. I can't. So he makes a motzi, breaks a piece off the bun, and he decides, you know what? The rabbinic law, I'm not going to eat it. I can't eat it. Rabbanan said I can't eat it. And nothing could have happened to it, but the Rabbanan said not to. You're not allowed to. I got up. I walked. I didn't supervise it. Nobody on the plane supervised. Okay, he sits down. There's a guy, a non-Jewish guy sitting next to him, older man. He says to him, aren't you going to eat your sandwich? So the kid thought the guy wants his sandwich. He says, no. He says, why aren't you going to eat it? He says, well, I don't know. I'm just not very hungry now. He says, no, you're hungry. I know you're hungry. Why? Tell me why you're not going to eat it. So I'll tell you the truth. You ask me, we have a law that kosher food, if it's not supervised, if you take your eye off it, nobody's supervising, you're not allowed to eat it. He says, why is that? He says, well, it's a rabbinic decree. Our great rabbis from 1,000 years ago decreed. So what was why they made that decree? Well, they're concerned somebody might have switched non-kosher meat for the kosher meat. So guys, I want to tell you something, buddy. You got some pretty smart rabbis. He says, why? He says, because, I've always wondered what kosher salami tasted like. And as soon as you got up out of your seat, I took a piece of my salami and I switched it with your salami, so I don't want to. Wow. So you understand, now it's kosher salami and it's a rabbinic decree. They knew what they were talking about. They knew what they were talking about. Guys, what do you call it? Guys curious about what the salami. That's what. So if a person practices, that's not even a permissible, it's a forbidden area. But if a person, there was a Jew went to Odessa. I told you that Or Sameach had once started a branch in Odessa. They called it Ordessa. They started a revolution. They're now schools and day schools. Odessa was this abandoned port. It was this completely under communist rule. It was completely secular. They started a whole frum community there. Now they started a frum community. So of course you have a Jewish community, you have a shul, and you have a bakery, and you have a Chinese restaurant. Everything that a good Jewish community needs. So they even had kosher meat. They had shechita. They had kosher meat. There was a Rav went to Odessa to teach Torah. He was in Odessa. And like every Jew who goes to visit a community, you always want to find out what's with the kashrus on the meat, the shechita, what's going on with the shechting. So he sees an elderly Jew, and he says to this guy, "How's the supervision on the shechita?" And I said, "The shechita is top-notch shechita. You can eat the meat, no problem." Okay. So the Jew sits down to eat the meat. He notices this elderly Jew's not eating the meat. And in Russia, apparently, animal protein is very important because it's so cold. The animal protein keeps your body warm. That's why. He sees this elderly Jew is not eating the meat. He says, "You told me the meat's kosher." It is. He says, "Why aren't you eating it?" He says, "I'll tell you. Look, I've been living in Russia my entire life. Every country has a national sport. In the United States, it's baseball. In England, it's English football. In Russia, it's revolutions. Right? That's a national sport in Russia. There's always a revolution. In Russia, there's always a revolution." He says, "Look, when I grew up, there was no meat. I couldn't eat the meat because the meat wasn't kosher. Now there's kosher meat, and I could eat it. And I really should eat it. Problem is that, this is an unpredictable country. I've already conditioned myself not to, I don't have a taste for meat anymore. If I start eating this kosher meat, and then they have a revolution again, and then there's no more kosher meat available, you're going back to America, you'll have plenty of meat. What am I going to do? I don't trust myself that I'll be able to overcome myself once I'm facing the challenge of non-kosher meat again, if that comes up. Therefore, I'd rather do without the kosher meat. The meat is perfectly kosher, I'd rather do without. That's what we mean a permissible area. That a person fights his battle in a permissible area. I had a guy who once here, one of the rabbis at the yeshiva. I went to the bus stop here. I was on my way home. I was sucking on a candy. I get to the bus stop. I saw my colleague. So I got to the bus. I said, "Do you want a candy?" He said, "Okay." I reached in my pocket. He reached out his hand. I said, "Here, take a candy." Then he goes, "Yeah, no." I said, "Why not? It's kosher. Why not?" He said, "I changed my mind." I said, "Why did you change your mind?" He says, "Just because I have an urge for something doesn't mean I have to satisfy it. Why do I have to satisfy every urge? I have to train myself that some urges, if it's permissible. Why should I? Why should I?" That's what it means. The training in a permissible area. It's not an easy thing. It's not easy. It's not easy. We're conditioned. If it's available, why not? Why not? What could possibly be wrong? Do you know there's a very holy Hasidic Rabbi who's alive today in Israel? A man who's alive today. I know the man himself. When he gets into a taxi cab, he has a wooden board that he carries with him. And when he takes a cab, he puts the wooden board down on the seat. Why do you think, Justin? Give a guess. Stab in the dark. Why would he put a wooden board on the seat?
Because he doesn't want to sit in comfort.
That's correct. He doesn't want to take pleasure out of the seat. Why? Just because it's available doesn't mean. Now, when I take a cab, I order a Mercedes. And I want good bucket seats when I get in. I'm paying for it. It better be comfortable. I enjoy every minute of it. This is a man of figures. I'm going to work. Because you understand? Because if you work on yourself over here, then the other things that are forbidden is not even a challenge anymore. That's what each person has to know. By the way, you have to know who you are and what you're capable of. This is very, very careful about. We have to be very careful with this. I know that for my balance and my equilibrium, I have to have a piece of cake for dessert. I have to be able to read a magazine at night. And I have to be able to play tennis. I need that. I need that in my avodas gym. Not tennis. Tennis I never liked. On TV, they always have the ball boys who go pick up the ball at the net. And when you're playing by yourself, you got to go keep running over, especially when you're hitting the ball into the net. So I never liked tennis. Whatever it is that you have to do. So for one person, what's the acid test? What's the acid test? The guys ask this all the time. I'd like to work on my self-control. I've decided to cut out chocolate cake. No more desserts. I want to work on my self-control. What's the acid test? How do you know if you're holding at that level or not? How do you hold it? I'll tell you. I'll tell you what I think is the rule of thumb. The rule of thumb is that, let's say I eat lunch. There's chocolate cake available. I'm going to pass on it. I'm a tzaddik, and I'm going to pass on it. Okay? What's your mood like the rest of the afternoon?
Great.
If your mood is great, then you're in the right area. But if you go to the next Chumash year, you go to a Gemara shir, and you're learning about Hababa Machteres Didon al chocolate cake, and all you're thinking about is your chocolate cake.
Oh, yeah.
Eat your chocolate cake. You're struggling with it too much. If you bypass it, if you're able to bypass it and you feel great, anybody who's ever deprived themselves of any good food, in principle, either you're dieting or you just say, you know what, there's good schnitzel available, but I know that if I eat the schnitzel now, I'm going to be sorry 6 hours from now. And therefore, I'm going to pass on the schnitzel. And it's a murderous battle because it really looks good. And instead, you everybody knows that 20 minutes later, you feel great. I didn't give in, and I'm not going to suffer later, and I didn't give in for a few bites of schnitzel. But while you're going through it, it's murder. And if afterwards that's all you're thinking about, then you're not on that level. That's not your battle right now. You have more serious battles to fight. You understand? So each person, there's no one rule. Each person, it's sometimes trial and error. Where am I holding in life? I went through a Shabbos a few weeks ago. My doctor told me that I got to start cutting out the junk food. I remember him telling me, my doctor says to me, you're this, that, the other. I'm thinking to myself, well, you're not a perfect 10 either. I mean, okay, but I'm paying him. He's not paying me. So I went through an entire Shabbos for the first time probably since the world was created. I went through an entire Shabbos without eating any cake. No cake, fruit, no cake. I felt great. I haven't repeated it since. What a mistake. What a mistake that was. I haven't repeated it since. So you feel great. When you do it, you feel great. I'm not torturing myself on Shabbos. I torture myself enough during the week. I'm not ready to get tortured on Shabbos yet. So there's a difference between enjoying your cake and taking your cake prisoner, as we're going to see here in the, okay, let's go to war against the cake. Now, there is a middle ground over there. That's what the Torah is talking about here. Okay, let's go on. Because somebody had a question. Somebody had a question?
Also, doesn't the Torah teach you to build fences around yourself so that you
Yes.
give into these temptations?
That's exactly what we're talking about. These are the fences. The fences are in the permissible area. The fences, if I could limit my chocolate cake, then I'm certainly going to limit my cheeseburgers. If I'm in other words, let me tell you, gentlemen, I'll tell you a fundamental principle. My father told me this many years ago, and I found to this day that it's the most true description I've ever heard regarding the Torah. What is the central theme of Torah that runs like a thread from beginning to end? If somebody were to ask you, what is Torah about? What is this book about? And you could use one description. There are several descriptions that are accurate. I found what I heard my father told me I feel is still the best description. So a lot of people will tell you the Torah is about God, and it's about devotion, all of which is true. All of which is true. All these things are true. The best description I ever heard for the Torah is about self-control. You have to control what you eat. You have to control your relationships. You have to control your anger. You have to control your ego. You have to control your selfishness. You have to control your desires. The entire Torah is a theme of self-control. That's what we're about. We're about self-control. We're not about deprivation. We're about self-control. And if I learn to control myself in the permissible area, sometimes a person just feels, okay, I'm not eating treif and I'm not doing averas. Good. Now I could unleash myself on the kosher for the stuff, right? That's not, you missed the point of Torah then. That's not what the goal of the Torah. The Torah is not an obstacle course. So avoid that, but just charge, attack that. That's not what the Torah is about. The Torah is about self-control. That's what what the theme really is over here. You're absolutely right. It's all about those fences in the permissible area. On the other hand, you also have to make sure that you don't push yourself into a situation where you're not enjoying life because you're being too harsh on yourself. And that's a very, very difficult lesson. When I first got married, I told my wife, I was in kollel. Kollel life is pretty intense. You're studying Torah 10, 12 hours a day. And I told my wife, I need an outlet. I need an outlet. And, sometimes when I would need some light readings, I'd read about the Chafetz Chaim or Moshe Feinstein. I said to my wife, hey, listen, I just need something that I could, clear my head a little bit once a week, Saturday night. So I told her it's either sports or politics. She said to me, I hate politics, definitely sports. Right? Oh, I was so happy. So so once a week I sit down with the Sports Illustrated. She would censor it first, and I would look at Sports Illustrated or just something because that's what I needed at the time. How do you gauge your need? Because there's a very fine line between what you need and what you want. That's tricky. I need to read Sports Illustrated a half hour a week. I want to read Sports Illustrated as many hours as I'm in kollel. Right, so that what you need and what you want, right? Then you have to have somebody objective who could tell you where you're holding. But it's sometimes trial and error, and you have to be careful not to be too easy on yourself. On the other hand, don't be too harsh on yourself, because if you're too strict on yourself, you can chase yourself right out of Yiddishkeit. Because sometimes Baalei Tshuvas, they get involved and they're very rigid. They don't allow themselves anything. They only speak Aramaic, and the next thing you know, they're out of here. Right, because Judaism is oppressive. Who told you to turn it into an oppressive? It's not an oppressive religion. It's a pleasant religion. You just have to do it properly. You have to know who you are and be honest with yourself. Okay, now let's go to the next mitzvah. This is one of possibly the most bizarre and misunderstood mitzvahs in the Torah. Right, and this needs to be understood well. So it talks about you're going off to war. Pasuk Yud Aleph, second line on the page. V'ra'isa b'shivya, you took captive at war. V'ra'isa b'shivya eshes yifas Torah. You see a beautiful woman among the captives. V'chashakta ba, you desire her. V'lakachta l'chol isha, and therefore you take her as a wife. Very strange. You're going to go and you're going to take this non-Jewish woman as a wife. There are even some opinions, different of opinions. There's some opinions that the first act of cohabitation is permissible at the battlefront. According to some, according to other opinions, no. You have to go through the whole procedure that the Torah describes here. Okay? What do you do with her? Ve'vesel toch beisecha, you bring her into your house. The gilcha is rosha, she shaves her head. The asasas tzipornea, she allows her fingernails to grow long and unruly. Ve'hisira esivla simla shiva me'aleh, she removes the garments that she was wearing when she was taken captive. The non-Jews, when they fought the Jewish people to entice the Jewish men to sin, they would deck the women out. So she removes her fancy clothing, and she puts on captive clothing. V'yashva v'veisecha, she sits in your house. The Gemara says she sits right at the entrance of your door. You see her as soon as you walk into the house every day. Uvachsa es avia v'es'ima yerach yamim. And then she cries. She mourns for her parents who you've killed at war, her family. And she cries for a month. Ve'achar kein, and after that, tavo eleu uve'alta, you make her your wife. Va'isa l'chala isha, and she becomes your wife. You marry her, you cohabit with her, and you marry her. You make her your wife. She goes through a conversion process, and you marry her. V'haya im lo chafatzta ba, if you did not desire her, v'shilachta l'nafsha, you set her free. U'machar lo sim karana b'kasef, you're not allowed to sell her for money as a non-Jewish slave, where other women you could. Her, you can't. Lo sis amer ba, you should not enslave her. Tachas asher inisa, because you have afflicted her. That's what the Torah says. Gentlemen, what are we talking about here? Jewish men go to war. And you're up at the battlefront, and you see a non-Jewish woman, and you decide you want to marry her. The Torah says, okay, take her home. And if you're really, you're going to put her through the acid test, though. Because usually when you date the girl, she's looking her best. And at the battlefront, she was certainly looking her best. Okay, take her home, shave her head. That's already bad news. Unless she's a modern performer. Take her home, shave her head, let her grow her fingernails. She stands there at the doorway, doesn't bathe for a month. She's wearing captive clothing, and you walk in and see her every single day. Every single day you walk up, and it could be a married man, by the way. And you walk in and say, hi, Debbie. Oh, hi, Baldy. Right, as you walk in. And then after a month, you're still infatuated with her, then you're allowed to marry her. What's going on here? Especially according to the commentaries who say that the first act of cohabitation is permissible at the battlefield. What's going on here? A non-Jewish woman, you're going to take her as a wife? Since when does the Torah permit you to take a non-Jewish woman and then convert her? You're not allowed to do that. What's going on here? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, it's the right column, fourth line. Right column, fourth line. And this Rashi also, you're going to hear this Rashi and you're going to be shocked. V'lakachta l'chol isha, you're going to take her as a wife. Says Rashi, if you find it, please show the person next to you. Lo dibra Torah ela keneged yetzer hara. The Torah here is addressing your evil inclination. She'im eina kodesh baruch hu matira. If God doesn't make her permissible, yisa'ena be'isser. You're going to marry her in a forbidden way. You're going to marry her one way or the other. You're going to take her one way or the other. So God says, all right, since you're going to do it, I'll make it permissible. Avalim nasa, if he does marry her, sof aliyos stone, he's going to end up hating her. I mean, that's a great argument. All right, maybe a guy comes to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, is this meat kosher or treif? And by the way, I'm going to eat it anyway. I got a cheeseburger. Am I allowed to eat it? And by the way, if you don't say I'm allowed to, I'm going to eat it anyway. All right, then it's kosher. Is that what the Torah is saying here? Is that what the Torah is saying here? You're going to marry her anyway. So God says, well, since you're going to marry her anyway, so okay, it's permissible. What's going on? You mean because I'm weak? That's right, the Torah makes it. Where else do you find such an example? And the answer is, you don't. The answer is you don't. So what's really going on here? What's going on here is God created us. You got men going to war. The nature of war is you kill, you feel victorious, you've tasted blood. You're in a different state than you're normally in. There's certain, you didn't want to be in Nazi Germany when the Russians invaded. Right? When the Russians invaded Nazi Germany, the Russians were not happy. About 20 million Russians were killed during the war. Many of them were starved to death. And when the Russian army invaded Germany, let's just put it this way, they were not Shomer Negia when they invaded Berlin. And you didn't want to be in the city at all if when the Russians invaded. Why? Because when you're a man who's gone to war, especially when you're victorious, you're almost in an animal-like state. God, who created us, knows what we're capable of, and what that limitation, exactly what we were talking about before. God knows what we're capable of. And the Torah is telling you, the man who won this war, when you won the war and you see a woman you desire, it is not humanly possible for you to overcome that desire unless we allow you to do it in a permissible way. You follow what's going on here? Because to demand something from you that you can't do, the Torah is not going to do. So everybody thinks, wow, that's great. That's great. But it's not great. It's not the good news. This is the bad news, gentlemen. You know why? Because there's nowhere else that the Torah does this. Which means that there's nothing else that you could argue it's not doable. So he says, well, I can't be frum because, then I can't eat my favorite seafood, which is treif. Oh, yes, you can. I can't overcome the desire. Yes, you can. What's the proof? Because if you couldn't, the Torah would have said you're allowed to do it. And since the Torah doesn't give you that out anywhere else, that means that there's nowhere else that you could use that as an excuse. Over here, the Torah says, God says, look, okay, this is different. I, who created you, know your limitations, and therefore, if you really can't muster up the self-control, so we have a dispensation here. But the dispensation has to follow a halachic pattern. Take her home, wait 30 days, that you could do. That you could do. Wait 30 days, make sure you see her every day, see her at her worst in order to discourage yourself. Let her hold while she looks so unattractive, why don't you let her hold your credit card too? So then you'll know what it's like to have two wives who are holding your credit card. That might discourage you. And then, at the end of 30 days, you still want to marry her, then you're allowed to do so. That's what the Torah is telling you. Now, I want to show you, before we even go on, I just want to show you another law. Take a look later on at chapter 23, verse 14. Here the Torah is talking about the Jewish army when they're at war. Top of page 1056, very top of page 1056. So the Torah says like this: when you're at war, the yad tiyeh lecha mechutz lamachane. You have to have a special designated place outside your camp. V'yatzasa shamachutz. When you have to relieve yourself, so you have to go out to the special place. Don't relieve yourself in the camp. Now we're talking about a battle. We're talking about a military, talking about an army who's out in the wilderness. And the Torah says, oh, by the way, we got bathroom rules. When you have to go, don't just go right outside your tent. Go outside. You have to have a special location outside the camp. And not only that, the yosed tiyeh lecha al azenecha. You have to have a shovel among your military weapons. One of the things you have to carry is a shovel. So when you go out, when you relieve yourself, use the shovel even outside the camp and cover over what you've done. That is so courteous, isn't it? Isn't that courteous? I mean, just imagine the Iraqi army is invading Kuwait, and I'm sure among their equipment they got rocket launchers, grenades, anti-tank missiles. Can you imagine that final formation when they go into battle and they're finding their final checklist? You know, they got the commander is saying, okay, gentlemen, let's check the weapons. You got rocket launchers? Check. You got grenades? Check. You got a shovel for the poopy? Check. You know, yeah, I can just imagine that's one of the first pieces of equipment they took because we want to be courteous. We don't want any Kuwaitis stepping in wherever we walked over there. What's going? You really think so? You really think so? It's like on the airplanes where they have. We suggest you clean up as a courtesy to the next customer. All of a sudden on the airplane, everybody, they don't have that in any public bathroom anywhere. But in airplanes, they're always having the bathroom, in courtesy to the next customer, clean up. Oh, that's so nice of you. And it is nice. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it. And don't get frightened by the loud sound that it makes, right? Nothing wrong with it. Here the Torah talk about people going to war. You're going to war? And by the way, when you go to war and you're killing people and taking captives, just out of consideration for the next person, just bring a shovel with you, will you? And cover it over. What's going on, Justin?
It's interesting because I never would have thought. I mean, disease, obviously.
What's that?
Disease, obviously. They probably realize that if you have excrements floating through your camp, people are going to get sick. They don't know why.
Certainly one of the benefits. It's certainly one of the benefits. You might not be there that long. You might be there a couple of days. You're besieging a city. You're not going to stay there and live there.
And you want to have the Rabbi Shalom at all times, and there's respect.
Right. The Rabbi Shalom has to be with you, and this drives Rabbi Shalom. It's got to be outside the camp. Okay, so go outside the camp. Why do you got to cover it over? What do you have to have a shovel with you for? Last chance.
Probably teaching you not to be like a dog, you be like a cat. Teaching you to cover up your own stuff just because you can't, you're out at work.
Very good. Very good. That's exactly the point. Exactly the point. You're at war, and we recognize that when you're at war that you're going to go through a change, and you could easily descend into animal-like behavior. And we even understand that when it comes to the woman, we're limited in what we expect from you. But at a minimum, put yourself through an exercise to realize and remind yourself you're not an animal. You're not an animal. Go out there with a shovel and cover up what you did. You're a human being with human dignity. And this, the Torah does demand from you, which means you can't say that when I'm at the battlefront, I'm not capable. Yes, you are. What's the proof? Because the Torah says to do it. What's the proof? Over here, the Torah doesn't say to do it. Then you're not capable of doing it. That's what the commentaries say. And therefore, the Torah says over here, you're going to marry this woman. I can't stop you. Torah comes along and says, we don't recommend it. We don't recommend it. Look at the very next pasuk. Ki siyena leish shtei nashim. When you have two wives. Ha'achas, back on page 1046. Right after the Torah says, don't sell her because you've afflicted her. She doesn't want to marry you. You don't want to marry her. Right after that, the Torah says, Ki siyena leish shtei nashim. When a man has two wives. Ha'achas ahuva v'achas stum. One is beloved and one is hated. The Torah is telling you, if you marry her, You take her along with your first wife, you're going to end up hating her. Why do you end up hating her? Why do you end up hating her?
They hate each other.
Well, I don't mind. That's entertainment. Let them go ahead. That's actually fun. You end up hating her. You end up hating her because the whole thing is based on a superficiality. It was an infatuation. Once the infatuation is gone, you're left with the person. Who is she anyway? She's some non-Jewish nation who is trying to attack you. Who is she? And you end up hating her because now you got to live with her. I told you, gentlemen, they say there's a food. They discovered a food that cures romance. It's called wedding cake. Now we're married. Oh, so that all of a sudden it's different. Right? Now, wasn't there a famous comedian? He said, who's that lady? He said, that's not a lady, that's my wife. Right? Because that's a famous Rodney Dangerfield, one of these guys. That's not my line. That's a famous line. That ain't no lady, that's my wife. Henny Youngman. That's not a lady, that's my wife. In other words, it's all different. It's all changed. So now you're married to her. Great. So you were attracted, and she was this, and she was that. Now you're married with her. Now you're stuck. And at that point, you're going to end up resenting her. I'm just skipping ahead. We're going to go back in a second. Look at the very next section. All the way to the last line on page 1046. Ki yeh ish ben sorer umora. When a man has a rebellious son. Einenu shomea b'kol aviv v'kol imay. Does not obey his father and his mother. And then he's out of control. We'll see what the Torah says there. Also a very bizarre law. So the Rashi brings down over here, Rashi quoting the Gemara says, it's a bad idea to marry this woman. If you marry her, you're going to end up hating her. And then you're going to end up having a child who's going to be a rebellious child. That's what the Torah, that's why these three sections follow each other. Why should he end up with a rebellious child? So the comment, everybody says, well, if you don't like your wife and then you end up with a child, it's going to be a rebellious child. There's more than that, gentlemen. What does the child sense on his father?
Hate.
That he doesn't have any respect for his wife.
Why? Even more than that. Why did you marry her? You married her because you're a superficial person, that's why. Well, if you're superficial with her, you're probably superficial in your Yiddishkeit also. The kid sees it. My dad's superficial. So what do you expect from a kid? My father doesn't care much about Yiddishkeit. His whole Yiddishkeit is superficial. Because if you're superficial in one area, you're probably superficial everywhere else. Therefore, there's no accident that becomes the progression over here that the Torah shows you. Now, let's go back for a second, because this whole section here with this woman is very enchanting. I'll tell you a Kabbalistic idea. You cannot ask me any questions about this. I will only tell you the Or HaChaim. You've heard of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, right? I'll tell you what the Or HaChaim says is really going on here. Now, this has nothing to do with what we just said now. This is a completely independent approach to the subject. The Or HaChaim says like this. When Adam sinned, the original sin, there were certain holy neshamas that were captured by the spiritual forces of evil, by the Sitra Achra. When Adam sinned, certain neshamas were taken captive. These are the souls that eventually through history would rejoin the Jewish people as converts. The name of this soul is Yefas Toar, the beautiful soul. That's the soul that will rejoin the Jewish nation. Now, who went to war for the Jewish people? Who were the battlers? Who went to war? You remember last week's Parshat? What does it say about a man? They make an announcement. Anybody who's recently gotten married, leave the battlefront. Anybody who's recently built a home, leave the battlefront. Anybody who's recently made a vineyard, leave the battlefront. Anybody who is afraid because they are guilty of sin, and you're worried that your sins will prosecute you at the battlefront, leave the battlefront. So who are you left with? Who are you left with at the battlefront? You got a bunch of tzaddikim up there. There are a bunch of tzaddikim who went to war. They're the people who are sinless. They didn't even talk between putting on their head tefillin and their hand tefillin. Those are the tzaddikim went to war. When the tzaddik goes to war, he sees this woman, and she has the neshama in her of the Yefas Tohar. And he's going to bring her into the fold. How's he going to bring her into the fold? He's going to marry her. There's only one problem. Are you sure that you're looking at her soul? Or maybe you're looking at the physical attraction. How do you know? Put her through the test. Keep her for 30 days when she's at her worst. And if after the 30 days you still see her as a Yefas Tohar, that means she's got one of the souls. And he marries her and he brings her into the Jewish people. She's one of the people who was predestined to convert to the Jewish people. That's what the Orach Chaim says. That's what the Orach Chaim says. Kabbalistically, we're talking about a much deeper idea here of bringing souls into the Jewish people. The plain meaning is, you're talking about a man who goes off to war, and he sees the woman, and he's infatuated, just as we would be infatuated on a human level. Orach Chaim is talking about at a much deeper level. Okay, now, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein points out over here that you have a peculiar law over here as well. After you've put her through this procedure, you decide you don't want to marry her. Now, in general, when you took captives at war, in the old days, you went to war. War gives you, let's say they attack you, you went off to war. You fought a war. Were you allowed to fight a war? The Torah gives you the right to fight a war. If you have the right to fight a war, you have the right to kill people. Why? Because the Torah gave you that right. So you've decided, you know what, instead of killing people, we're going to take captives. And you're allowed to, and you're allowed to take slaves. The Jewish people took Canaanite slaves. Took a Canaanite maidservant. And she has to serve you now. This woman, because of what you've done, you're not allowed to enslave her. You have to set her free. What's going to happen when you set her free? She may very well go back to her people and become an idol worshiper again. Okay? Why do you set her free? Says Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, you benefited from her. If you've lived with her, you've benefited from her. Since you've benefited from her, you have a debt of gratitude towards her. You have a debt of gratitude. You have to learn how to be a grateful person. A grateful person doesn't take advantage of people. Set her free. For your benefit, not for her benefit. Because you've got to train your character. You have to be a person who recognizes that you have a debt of gratitude. In Hebrew, gratitude is called hakaras hatov. Somebody in English, somebody who does not, somebody who's not grateful, called an ingrate. You ingrate, somebody serves you a meal. Oh, there's no dessert. Just served you a meal. What do you want? Well, I would say thank you for what they gave you instead of focusing on what they didn't give you. People are ingrates towards their parents, towards their friends, towards their contemporaries. People are ingrates. I gave you a little bit, so you deserve more. That's an ingrate. Very, very bad midah. A person has to know that you have a debt of gratitude. That's part of what we have to develop. We have to develop that, keep our ego in check, not be selfish. We also have to develop the characteristic of hakaras hatov. You have to recognize the good somebody has done for you, and you have to pay back that debt. You have a debt of hakaras hatov. You owe her. And if you take advantage of her now and turn her into a slave, it's bad for your own character development. Set her free. That's what the Torah says. This idea, in England, there was a rat got into a house. A rat got into somebody's house in England. So the kids in the house took brooms, and they had the rat trapped under a bed. And they were going to kill the rat. All of a sudden, the grandfather walks into the room and says, "Leave the rat alone." He said, "Zeta, the rats are dangerous. They're disease-riddled. You can't." He says, "No, let the rat go." And he opens up the front door and lets the rat run out. So he says, "Why did you let the rat go?" He says, "Look, I was in the Holocaust. I was in a concentration camp. At night, it was freezing in the camps. We didn't have blankets. The only way we could stay warm is that we laid in the bed. We lay against each other, and our body heat kept each other warm. I was the guy on the end of the row. So on one side, there was somebody next to me. On the other side, I was exposed. Every night, the rats, who were also cold, they came and rubbed up against me because they wanted to stay warm, but they kept me warm. I have a debt of gratitude to the rats, so leave the rat alone." Okay, now, if you stop and think about it, we don't know that the rat in England was related to those rats back there in his barracks in Germany, right? We don't. Who said there was any connection between them? The answer is, conceptually, a person has to train himself that I have to train myself to be a grateful person. The Gemara says, a well that you drank out of, don't throw a stone in it. Don't throw a stone into a, there's probably a saying like that in English also. Don't throw a stone into the well that you drank water out of, something like that. The well is inanimate. The well couldn't care less if I throw a stone, drop a boulder, whatever I do in the well couldn't care less. The answer is, yeah, but what about you? What about you? What's it going to do to your character? You're training yourself. And again, what you had mentioned, it's a fence. It's a fence on the midos area. That way, when I'm involved with a human being, when my wife serves me supper, I'll remember to say thank you. And when my kid goes and gets the newspaper for me, I'll remember to say thank you. And when somebody gives me a ride, I'll remember to say thank you. Instead of taking it, well, you should have given me a ride sooner. Say thank you because he did something for you. That's what the Torah is teaching you over here. The Torah is teaching you. By the way, just my own pet peeve. If somebody ever does you a favor, don't say Yasher Koyach. and don't say tizkila mitzvahs. Don't do the frum thing. Because Yasher Koyach means you should be strong. Tizkila mitzvahs means may you do many more mitzvahs. That's not thank you. That's not thank you. That's a bracha. You want to give somebody a bracha? Give them all the brachas you want. Say thank you. Thank you humbles you. Tizkila mitzvahs doesn't humble you. Tizkila mitzvahs is just an annoying way of getting it out of you. Sometimes you do somebody a favor, you do somebody a favor, you give somebody a ride, says, Tizkila mitzvahs. Now we're even. I give you a ride, you gave me a bracha. I have earned your bracha by giving you a ride. That's not thank you. Thank you is good for you. Forget the other person. Thank you is good for you. It humbles you, which is what you're supposed to feel, because you have a debt of gratitude. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tizkila mitzvahs.